Hello, I'm Cameron, maths teacher, physics teacher. A while back, I made some graphs on the spread of a coronavirus, and we looked at the data yesterday, and we found it was scarily accurate, incredibly accurate. In fact, we found that my model predicted that 2 days ago the model said there'd be about 32,000 deaths, which there were. It said the peak was about 1,150 deaths a day, which it was, and it said that we'd be down to about 250 deaths a day by then too. And for some bizarre reason, the model predicted those to be in a very, very small percentage. It was incredibly accurate. And then we started changing things, saying, okay, well, let's lift lockdown. I'm just going to quickly go through the model for those who haven't seen it before and show you how it was made, what we did. So we had a time increment of 1 day, so basically we had a number of factors that happened every day, and then the next day looked at yesterday and took into account a few things. We had an infection rate, and we played about with that at the time because we found the infection rate, the number of people going up, was about every 3.5 to 4 days. And that equated to an infection rate of 0.25. Now what that means is every day if you've got it, you give it to 0.25 people. So essentially it takes 4 days before you pass it on to somebody. But it could happen any time within those 4 days. And what that means is if you've got it 4 days later, 2 people have got it. 4 days after that, 4 people have got it. 4 days after that, 16, and so forth. So it was slightly quicker than that, about 3.5 days, but that gave an infection rate of 0.25 a day. So if you've got 100 people infected 1 day, they're going to infect 25 people. We had a death rate of 3.5%, and that gives a cure rate of 96.5. And we did a very simple model. We said, look, here's the population. We had the infection rate, which we put in this column here. We did the herd immunity, so once you'd got it, you couldn't get it again. So if the population was 66 million at the start, 66 million people could get it, and then as more people got it, we said they couldn't get it again. So here you've got, I don't know, maybe 30,000 people have got it, so you take that off 66 million, and there's still a huge percentage of the population who can get it. And then we looked at, okay, if you've got a number of cases, how many new cases you're going to get the next day, so what's your new active cases, and then we went down about 2 weeks and said, you know, after about 2.5 weeks, if you've got it, unfortunately about 3.5 of those people will have died, and the others will have got better, and that gave us a cured today, a died today, active cases, and total cured. But then we put in a factor called social distancing, and social distancing affected the infection rate. So when the social distancing was at 1, it meant the infection rate was 0.25, so it's doubling every 3.5 days. But then we could reduce that, so we said 0.6 was going to be about 2/3 of the actual infection rate. So instead of infecting, a person every 4 days, 0.25, that 0.25 gets multiplied by 2/3. So what's that, about 18ish, I guess, 17. So it goes down by a third. And in the UK, we had sort of half measures social distancing for about 10 days. And then we went to full social distancing, so we put it down to a third. So we said only the infection rate dropped by a third when we went there. And we just left it at that. And then somebody said to me yesterday, look, you've worked your model forward, because what I did is I put the figures in of lifting our social distancing today, actually, on Wednesday, and seeing what happened. And it showed that our death rate goes up from, the current projection of this model is 37,000. If we lift social distancing and put it back where it was in the first week, like we're going today, then the death rate goes up to 55,000. And our maximum peaks per day in the future is going to be about 350, so it isn't going to go up to the 1150. Anyway, somebody says, look, why don't you take the programme back and say, what would have happened had the government gone full social distancing 2 weeks earlier, like the rest of Europe? So I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to change all of these figures to, well, let's go to, there's our social distancing starting on day 51. So let's take that back to 37, 2 weeks here. And we're going to put 0.3. Now, just to give you some figures, at the minute we have 32,000 deaths, 32,500 maybe, because it's gone up since I reviewed this 2 days ago. Our maximum deaths per day were 1150. I'm going to change this now and imagine we'd gone to full lockdown 2 weeks earlier and see what happens. So if the government had locked down 2 weeks earlier, let's look at our total deaths. Now our total deaths at the minute is looking at 37,000. If we had locked down 2 weeks earlier, 6,700. Wow. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Died today, peaked at 1150. It's peaking at less. Oh, hang on. No, I've got this wrong because I didn't copy and paste it all the way down. I need to, excuse me. I was looking at a figure that went quite high. Let's do this again. 0.3, okay. So it died today, peaked at, gosh, 135. So if we had gone to full lockdown, 2 weeks beforehand, when we started the partial lockdown like the rest of Europe did, I guess, the maximum deaths today would have been 135, as opposed to the 1150 we had. The total deaths, I said 6,000, that was wrong, I do apologise, my spreadsheet didn't copy all the way down. The total deaths would have been 24,000 as opposed to 37,000. And where we are now, which I think is about 120 on this spreadsheet, at the minute we're on about 32,000 deaths. This is on about 1,900 at this stage. So, quick conclusion. If we had locked down earlier, 2 weeks earlier, our total deaths would have been 30% less. And the died today peak would have been significantly less. Hindsight's an easy thing. What I will say is that I have a business that trades all over Europe. I was in Ireland when this really started to break out. I was supposed to go to Germany. The show in Germany I was supposed to trade at had closed. The show the next week in Ireland had closed. I came home the week afterwards. Britain held the Cheltenham Festival. It held Crufts. It was crazy. We knew this was going on. We saw what was happening in the ski resorts of Austria. We saw what was happening in Bergamo. We saw how this thing had spread. And those 2 weeks have cost a lot of lives. I've kept this quite mathematical so far, but in hindsight what I will say is that our government has a chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, who isn't a mathematician or physicist, but seems to think he is. He's made lots of jobs on people who work with various models. They had this plan about herd immunity, and if you saw my models in March, it said if you want to cut this infection rate by half using herd immunity, half the population needs to get it. So just to half the infection rate, which is nowhere near as powerful as social distancing, you needed 30 million British people to get it, and that meant 1 million deaths on the current death rate. So did the UK get it wrong? Well, being as Leipzig Book Fair, 300,000 people was cancelled, and that was due on March the 12th. And mid-March the Cheltenham Festival took place and Crufts took place with the same kind of attendance. Yes, the UK got it wrong, and there have been tens of thousands of needless deaths, surely. The moral of the story is politicians shouldn't listen to advisors, they should listen to scientists. Quite sad, really, to think of it in that way, but that's where we are. The UK has had the highest fatality rate in Europe. Not the highest fatality rate, the highest number of fatalities, and it came to the UK 2 or 3 weeks after it hit Europe. The epicentre in Europe was really Bergamo, after a Champions League football game and the ski resorts of Austria. We know that. You only have to Google something like Ischgl in Austria and find out what happened when a barman had it there. It's a very social ski resort. If you look at travel in Europe in February, most of it is to and from the Alps. People are going on holiday to ski. It's not the summer, and it really spread virulently throughout the Alps, and then people took it back with them. Iceland picked up, I think it's 11 or 15 skiers entering Iceland who'd been in Ischgl, and they identified them with a simple infrared thermometer as having a higher temperature than would be expected. Surely every airport in the UK needs a thermometer, an infrared thermometer. Wouldn't it be a good idea to have that in every workplace, perhaps? A school? Just your staff and your kids on the way in walk past an infrared thermometer. If they're quite high, let's go and check them out. Let's keep them away from other people. Very, very easy test. It doesn't say someone's got it or not got it, but it gives you an idea that someone needs testing. So I will leave you with that. My spreadsheet model was incredibly accurate to this date, and had we socially distanced 2 weeks beforehand, we would have cut the death rate by 30%.